Hi, and welcome to the Extraordinary Lovers podcast with Michael Gibson and Laurie Handlers, the one and only. And this is our number one episode. This is our first episode, I should say. All right, so we're here to share with you a number of things, but the first thing we wanted to do is just kind of introduce ourselves so you know who we are. And this is going to be, our first podcast ever, so we really want to make a good impression, right? So let's start with you. I love talking about your comeuppance, like how you came up in the world of Tantra, of sacred sexuality, and all of the things that you've accomplished in your life are pretty remarkable.
Thank you.
So I'd like to start off by saying I'm very, very privileged, it's probably the best way to put it, to be Laurie's partner. And so, and to be considered an extraordinary lover. Laurie Handlers is the general of the sexual revolution. And I want you to say more about where you came from and how you got here to be the general.
Okay, so when I was growing up, I always thought there was more to sex than this. Something going, like frictional, something going in and out. And I first had sex when I was 18, and I felt like there was something more. I always felt like there was something more. And that's like sex with another. I touched myself before that.
Right.
I didn't grow up thinking that I would get hairy palms or I would go to hell if I touched myself.
Do I have hairy palms?
I'm lucky that I didn't grow up with that kind of dogma, but I thought there was something more to it. I thought there was something deeper to it. There was something to explore, and I didn't meet any partners who wanted to talk about that with me. They thought I was weird.
Yeah.
Which, okay, I'm weird. So I explored. I just kept exploring. And I believed that sex was a normal part of life and that people shouldn't limit how many partners they had, and they shouldn't limit themselves. They shouldn't limit their experience. So I didn't.
Yeah, good.
I didn't. And in the 60s and 70s, when people were into flower power and just make love, not war, I did that a lot. And that's where I earned my stripes. And then in the 80s, I read an article by Margot Anand. It wasn't by her, it was about her. And it talked about Tantra. And I went, this is it. This is just what I've been looking for. Why hasn't anybody told me about this before? But there was no internet then. It was like in 86.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So I had to wait. And I waited 10 more years until a Tantra class came near where I was, which was in Washington, D.C. And I took my first Tantra class with Absolute Tantra in 1996. And it was just, my first day in the class, I said, this is what I've been looking for. This is who I am. This is what I'm about. And it was very holistic. It wasn't just sex.
Yeah.
It was much more than I expected.
Yeah, Tantra had that same reveal to me as well, because I really thought Tantra was all about sex and massage and stuff like that. But yeah.
Yeah, you get somebody off, or you do it in esoteric ways. It's different and whatever. And It turns out that it's just a portal. Sexuality is just a portal to a whole way of life, to a whole study and set of practices on what to do to keep yourself vital.
Well, take us back just a little bit, because you didn't start out in Tantra. You started out as a professional. You are a teacher. You're certified and qualified.
I have a master's degree in education. I taught elementary school. I taught college. I taught women's studies. And at universities.
You led women's groups.
Yeah, I led women's groups and men's groups.
Yeah.
That's all part of the history. And then I went into corporate America.
Right.
And I was very successful in corporate America, both in industry, like in a software company, and then I worked at Landmark Education.
Right.
So, and I was super successful at Landmark Education. So I'm not a newcomer to transformation.
Right.
And I call Tantra the transformation through pleasure.
Right.
And, that's... I coined that. That's I see that as Tantra as a transformative technology that's different from just in the mind, just distinguishing words and ontology. No, your body finds out that it's much more
right.
than what we believe our bodies to be.
Well, and there's a lot of connections in Tantra. In fact, Tantra has been known as a conversation around weaving together.
Body, mind, and spirit.
Correct. Body, mind, and spirit, and all the other ways in which we connect as human beings, not only with ourselves, but with others, right? With the world itself and our own realities. So that's exciting. It's interesting to hear you talk about like how you came about. And then you took it to you're taking it to the next level. We can't say you took it to the next level. You wrote a book called Sex and Happiness. It's a #1 Amazon international bestseller. I don't know if I said that right. Amazon international #1 bestseller or something.
Yes.
But you wrote that book, and then you turned that into a program where people can actually integrate the tantric laws of intimacy into their own lives. And we are starting to see people really having this transformation through pleasure.
We are.
It's amazing.
The thing is, I wrote the book while I was teaching. I mean, the book was about what I was learning when I was teaching.
Right.
It was really different from reading a tantric primer. It's really different from writing a tantra. It doesn't have a lot of tantric exercises in it, but it really has the essence of what a person can get from the practices.
But you do teach those practices.
I do.
And those practices are normally found in your live courses, which you started Bliss and Ecstasy
and Initiation.
So you had 3 tiers of the Sex and Happiness transformational programs, and those have evolved. And so they've evolved into now the Sex and Happiness journey, which can be found online. And so before COVID, right, we were traveling the world, and you were teaching all over the world, and one of the highest sought out speakers on Tantra and sexuality in the world. Laurie's very well known all across the
United States and other places.
Internationally, yeah.
Internationally.
So what's interesting is that you've been able to take that and put it online, so it's accessible to everybody. You don't have to show up somewhere, pay money for the ticket, pay money for the thing, the place
to be.
You don't have to fly. No
there.
Traveling, none of that.
Right.
You can actually do it from the comfort of your own home with your beloved. It's really amazing. Like the technology today has just changed everything.
It has.
And at first, we were a little bit skeptical as to whether or not some of this could actually transfer over video to people. we were very skeptical, and then we found out that some real amazing transformations took place.
We found out right away.
Yeah, immediately.
We didn't have a choice. We were planning to teach in Israel, and then we couldn't fly, and we said, okay, let's put it online, and we had people from 7 different countries participating. So
let's help people out with the timeline, if you will.
Okay.
So the timeline really is you were in corporate America, you had been with Landmark, you've been transformation all along.
That was 80s, 90s.
You got involved in Tantra at some point. It was brewing in your system for about 10 years, and then it began to come about. And then you became a teacher of Tantra, and that is when your life really took on its meaning. And you are now a lead facilitator with ISTA, International School of Temple Arts, which is an amazing set of programs they have, as well as being in a leadership body. So there's a huge community all around the world. ISTA is.
It is.
And I'm a graduate. Not to toot my own horn, but I got there because of you, because I could see there was something, right, way beyond the Tantra that I was learning, and this starts to take you into some shamanic stuff. So how did we end up at Extraordinary Lovers?
We have to talk about you. Like, who are you?
This is where I come in, right?
Okay.
So we're going to talk about this, but now we've caught Laurie up to the point where she is with all these other these programs and these other organisms, including her own. And then I come along, and so I have a very different story. Although I was in technology, you were in software.
Right, but I was a trainer. I didn't, I wasn't a software. I didn't write code.
Yeah, well,
I wasn't one of those people like you that you throw meat under the door and like you sit at your computer all the time. We have to yank you away from it.
So I am. I'm an IT consultant by trade. I've done this for a long time, specifically networks and security, switching, routing, all the rest. And so I've done that for the last 18 years. And during that time as a network engineer, I went through divorce, and I had to figure out how to get back into, dating and all this other stuff. So I found myself going down a very different path. the path that took me was one of, figuring out how to talk to women. First of all, I'd been married for 16 years, so I had no idea. So thankfully, the pickup artist community came along, or it was really growing at that point in time. And so I had a number of mentors there, and I learned how to do that. And then going beyond that, one of the struggles that I had was, although I could talk to women and even get them to come home with me, right?
Then what do you do?
There was a real problem with, what do I do now? Like, oh my gosh, this is about to happen. And I was thinking, I knew enough. And I had some pretty bad crash and burns happen to me. So yeah, I won't disclose a whole lot. That's for another episode. But after going through that, I decided, you know what? I've got to learn this. I mean, I've got to figure this out. And so I did what any IT professional would do. I Googled it. I went online. I went online and I started looking up, how do you become sexually better? And so I was getting good at becoming, the communicator and being able to hold interest and to understand, how women, kind of operate. And I was really fortunate to land at Landmark at that point. And I really started to see myself. This is when the inner work began, because I was constantly just trying to do the outer stuff. How do I get this? How do I do that? How do I me? But when I went to Landmark, I started to realize, oh, wow, I have to be the one who could attract a woman in the first place. So it was a lot of work that had to go into that. So
we should thank Landmark. Landmark had a tremendous influence on you.
Definitely.
And a tremendous influence on me, although we didn't meet there.
That's true, yeah. We'll talk about how we met in a little bit. So yeah, get ready. It's going to be fun. So as I began to learn how to become better sexually, I started taking on, I took on a couple of courses. One was how to do tantric massage. And so I learned how to do tantric massage, and I had no idea what tantra really was. I just knew that it was the name of a type of massage. So that's where I got my tantra.
That's what most people think.
That's what
People think. They call somebody up and the person does tantric massage, and so then they think they know tantra.
Right, yeah. Well, I didn't know tantra. I had no idea, but I did have some skills on how to touch a woman's body. It was great training, and so I started to develop myself that way. But being the nerd that I am, like I'm the guy that likes to write things down, and I take notes, and I make sure that I can see how everything kind of structures and connects to each other, because there's systems in everything, right? Our bodies are a system. So let me not go far down that rabbit hole, but I really started looking at the systems and how they worked, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And so I started to discover how a woman's body worked, how pleasure could be turned into a protocol. Like I could learn how to do things and step by step in a way that would really bring about this pleasure thing, and I got good at it, and I stopped having crash and burn. I stopped having
women walk out of your apartment.
Women's, yeah. So and I was still struggling with how to meet women and talk and all that other stuff, because I was a little bit older than the younger guys that were in the PUA community. So that's where I came up. And then one day a friend of mine invited me to a party, and it was a clothing. This is the first party I'd ever been to. It was a clothing optional.
It wasn't the first party you'd ever been to. It's the first clothing optional party.
This kind of party was the first, yeah, thank you. First kind of party I'd ever been to, which was a clothing optional erotic dance party. And he assured me that it was optional. Like I didn't have to take my clothes off. So I went. And, at one point at this party, I'm standing there at the bar, which was basically the counter in the kitchen that had a bunch of wine bottles on it. And I'm looking at the wine bottles and I'm thinking, yeah, I like that one. I like this one. And up walks Laurie Handlers. And I have no idea who she is. And she, we hello, how are you?
And we like the same kind of wine.
Yeah, we like this.
And both of us didn't have our clothes off.
Do you remember what kind of wine it was?
Yeah, Apothic Red.
Yep, Apothic Red.
I don't like it anymore, though.
I do. I just don't drink anymore.
Right.
So Apothic Red. And we talked about it a little while, and then we were cordial and nice to meet you, and then we went our separate ways. And I'd like you to pick up the story from there, because you tell it better than I do.
Then a week later, I was invited by two people who were trying to get One Taste started in Phoenix, Arizona, to something called a turn-on. And a turn-on is an introductory evening to introduce people to oming, or better known as orgasmic meditation. And I was helping them form that in Phoenix.
Yeah, that for me was more like continuing education.
Yeah.
So that's why I was there.
So I went and I walked in, and then shortly thereafter you walked in, and I went up to you and I said, "Didn't I meet you at that party the other night?" And you said, "Yeah."
Yeah.
And that was that. We didn't really have a big attraction for each other. And then one of the things they do in a turn on is they put somebody into what's called a hot seat. So they put Michael into the hot seat, and they said to him, "What do you want?"
And I said, I believe there's a goddess in every woman, and I want to meet her.
And I got like all stirred inside. I got like, is this guy for real? So I asked him the question, "Have you told anybody this?" And he said no. And then they let him off the hot seat, and then the evening went on, maybe another 45 minutes or so, and then the evening was over, and it was in a bookstore that had a wine bar. So I went up to him and I said, "We should have a glass of wine."
Yeah.
And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Because I am the goddess, and what you said got me a little wet." And his eyes just went, okay.
My mind was blown I got to tell you, no woman had ever said that to me before, anything like that.
And never
before.
will.
Yeah. Yeah, you are clearly unique. Yeah. So I was like, yeah, okay, let's go have a glass of wine. So we did. And
then we vetted each other. We call it vetting, where you ask, what trainings have you been to? How much money have you spent on yourself, on transformation? What have you done with yourself to grow? And we both...
Yeah, we had similar backgrounds in Landmark. I had a couple of other things that I had done, with Psi seminars and some other stuff. So we talked about this, and we went through the landmines of where, whether or not this person is even compatible, and have they done any work on themselves. And I was impressed. Was very impressed.
And then he said to me,
and I still didn't know who she was. I had
he didn't know who I was in the world, you know.
And she had long hair. She didn't have...
Right, I had hair extensions at the time.
During that time, as we were vetting each other, I said to her, I said, what do you think? Can we date?
And I said, sure.
And then she said,
what?
I need to tell you something.
Oh, yes. I said, I need to tell you something. When you buy a pack of cigarettes, it has the Surgeon General's warning on it. And he said, yeah. And I said, well, I come with one of those warnings. I warn you that I will disrupt your life.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't know if he took that as excitement, as a challenge, as a gauntlet. All I know
I
is
I thought it was adorable, and I laughed a little bit.
And so he said, okay. And then we made a date.
Yeah. And then we had our date. It was a week later or so. And also, actually, I think what had happened was we had the date, and then the timeline went on, and we connected again, and then I found out who you were during that date. So essentially what happened was we got together, and I had a podcast called The Edge Podcast with Mike G. And in that podcast, I was doing interviews with people that were really on the edge, like all kinds of different people. And she fit that, that criteria, like someone who's on the edge, because she told me, I'm a Tantra teacher and this. And I went, wow, that's fascinating. So I had her over onto the podcast, and we had an amazing conversation. In fact, we are going to put that up here. It'll be one of the other episodes.
It'll be actually 2 episodes because it's very long.
And it'll be a throwback, it'll be a throwback to Mike G.
Yeah.
So it's a little different.
We're going to make part
format.
1 and part 2 out of it.
Right. But in that conversation, I discovered who Laurie Handlers really was. And so she shared with me during that conversation much of what she shared with you just now. However, we went deep. We talked about the films that you've made, the book that you wrote, what inspires you, how you see yourself and how you're moving through the world. It was really, really powerful. And you get to see the woman, the woman behind the goddess, right? Like, it's really amazing. Great conversation. So after that, we had some wine at my place. My studio was at my place. And then we had an evening. And that evening turned out pretty well.
And here we are. And it's 5.5 years later.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
So what's an extraordinary lover? Like, how did that
Preamble,
happen?
right? Well, it's interesting that you say that because that night, after we had made love and it was extraordinary, you said to me, you said, wow, you
Fucked me like you meant it.
and I said, I did.
And that was really, yeah, you do. And so that was the beginning. Soon thereafter, I told him that he needed to teach men how to touch women. Like I even Tantra men, they know how to eye gaze, but they don't always know how to touch.
Right.
Like how to actually touch a body so that it feels felt and gotten. And he knows how to do that. And I said, we need to start an academy for men.
Right.
So this whole Extraordinary Lovers piece comes out of us creating the Academy for Men, you creating the course Just Add Skill for Men,
Right.
me teaching Tantra for many years. I taught Tantra for many years and didn't have a relationship.
Right.
You know, like this. I had one in the beginning when I first started teaching Tantra.
Right.
And then that was over. And then I had, something here, something there, but nothing that was of any real consequence. Like I wanted to keep or to continue to juice.
Right.
And then I met you, and it's years later.
Yeah.
And I said,
Yeah, and I had to actually I had to go back to school really to learn some of the things that I've had to learn over the last 3 years. I think it is. One of those was to start an apprenticeship in your apprenticeship program and graduate that and complete that. And so I was able to do that, and out of that I became a sex and happiness coach. And so I'm certified with that, and then also had to do ISTA and serving the community in that way, doing men's groups, leading men's groups, also supporting men's groups. And then, working our way through. And at some point we were looking at this going, this is so amazing. Like we both have it that we could pinch ourselves, this is, wow, this is an amazing relationship. And so we started looking at, well, what could we offer? How do we offer this to couples? Because Laurie and I have it that, healthy couples are really like an endangered species. So we're so thankful that there is a community out there that's working on helping couples. And what we look at is, as couples go, it's not just couples. It's anybody who's in relating or relationship with each other. So you might be polyamorous. We don't exclude any term or style.
Or configurations. We don't really care what your configuration is. We just care that you become an extraordinary lover.
Exactly. So you as an individual become an extraordinary lover, and then you can make all your loving extraordinary. And so that's where we are now. I mean, and we decided that one of the best ways to get this out and to share these concepts with people is to give it away, is to do podcasts, is to create content that people can really take home with them and implement in their lives. And something simple. It doesn't have to be hard.
It's not hard, but we challenge what your parents were like. We challenge what you've seen in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
We challenge what your romantic notions are of Cinderella. Like we challenge all that, and we know that you can create something like that. Like I feel like I have a Cinderella life, but I didn't learn that at Walt Disney. Yeah. So we challenge that, and we say there's work that you have. I mean, it's like when you start doing the work, there's no blame. There's no making the other person wrong, and that's just, you have to be a grown up. Yeah. And so we work with people and we grow them up.
Yeah. So some of the things that we really have excelled at, I think, are our communication styles, the way that we seduce each other, the way that we keep it fresh and connect, our lovemaking, skills have progressed, I think. And one of the things that I think has really made it so exciting is that it's never the same. We live out our lives with the idea of making love in the unknown and making love to life in the unknown. So a lot of this is really coming from that kind of an ideology, if you want to call it that. But it keeps things fresh. It keeps it alive, and that's the relating. That's how we're relating to each other. And so you asked the question just a few moments ago. So what makes an extraordinary lover?
Yeah.
And I think we have some answers for you. And I want you to stay tuned. We would like to actually be able to have this conversation with you and also with other extraordinary lovers who we're going to have on the program with us, interviewing them and finding out what makes them tick and how do they do it, So we know how we do it, but let's answer the question. What makes an extraordinary lover? Someone who is committed to return to love.
No matter what.
Yeah. Someone who is committed to love. So oftentimes what you find yourself in a relationship is one of three spaces, like hot, juicy, right? At the very beginning, the relationship is amazing. It's so sexy. It's so good. The sex is like new and fresh and right? Or you might be in the kind of the after the honeymoon phase, where it's kind of you've gotten into a routine and things
it's like a rut.
Can start to feel like you're going down the same damn path every single day. A rut is a good way to look at it. And oftentimes that's where you're going to find yourself feeling a little resentment and maybe
resigned. Maybe.
Every now and then you start to feel like, who the fuck put all these eggshells everywhere, and now you're walking on eggshells. So that's the space that some people might find themselves in, or the other place that people might find themselves in is that space where it's like, I just don't want to be in this relationship anymore. There's just nothing in it for me, and I give and give and give, and I just can't seem to get. And it happens on both sides of that relationship. And so what we have found is that the couple who can move their way through those other areas and then come right back to love where it's hot and juicy, just like in the beginning, that's extraordinary. That is what is an extraordinary lover. And it takes being creative.
It takes commitment.
It takes commitment, commitment to return to love. And more than anything, it takes the beginner's mind to look at everything fresh and new, and also to deal with yourself, to really put on that you're the extraordinary lover. So we found that, every now and then not every now and then, sometimes when we're coaching people, they'll ask us the silliest questions. And one of the questions is, well, how do you have a fair fight? And Laurie and I are like, what are you fighting for? Like, fighting is so ordinary, and it's usually because someone's hurt, or it's because somebody needs to be right? What do we say?
Being right is ordinary.
Being right is ordinary. There's nothing extraordinary about being right.
But sometimes people fight it because they just fight. That's like their trauma response, and they don't even know that they're fighting. Sometimes
people are they're not really conscious of the fact that they are addicted to cortisol.
Right. That's a big one.
Cortisol and adrenaline, and what we bring into the conversation is you got to know these things about your body, about how your hormones work, and all of this. And so it's important to note that when you're having an experience where you feel hurt and you're feeling put down or put upon, oftentimes you're experiencing cortisol release, and it can be devastating, especially if it becomes recurrent over and over and over again. Next thing you know, you're in a narrative, and there you are, right? Wow, how the fuck did we get here? It's a scary place to be when
it repeats and repeats and repeats.
So what we've done is we've cracked the code on communication, thanks to some amazing mentors in our lives and the ability to be able to share this technology with people. And so communication is a huge part of it. And another part of it, I think, is the ability to communicate not only when we're talking about how do we solve problems and how do we come back to love, but we communicate how do we make love? What turns you on? What are your desires, your fears, and your boundaries? And how do I be a part of that creation in that moment, right? Mm-hmm. So that's incredible. That's really extraordinary.
So we plan to share a lot of this with you on this show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would it be like? What would it be like for you if you knew that if you had a fight coming or something, that you could communicate your way right through it, quickly get to the point where you start to really communicate what's going on for you and return to love. And then plan some makeup sex, because you're going to need oxytocin, baby. You're going to need it.
You need oxytocin all the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, so.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, I love this. One last thing I want to say about it is too often we lose our sovereignty in relationships. And I think one of the things that you and I
we were
do,
taught to do that.
Yeah. You're supposed to compromise. You're supposed to...
You're supposed to love the other person more than you love yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, we're taught adoration from a really weird angle.
Yeah.
Like, I adore you, but I love myself.
Right.
So that I love myself, there's a way of being when you love yourself. So we talk about that too, self-love.
It's a call. Extraordinary Lovers is a call to people to return to their sovereignty, to know their boundaries, to really become fearless communicators, and to be able to hold love inside of you that comes out, not seeking the love from without to put it in, right? This is an overflowing wellspring of love that can come from you. So that's really what an extraordinary lover looks like, feels like, tastes like, smells like. And we invite you to join us on this amazing journey. So, honey, I had a good time with you today.
Thank you.
This is fun. Well, we look forward to seeing you again soon on Extraordinary Lovers podcast right here on the Sex Talk Radio Network. Go to sextalkradionetwork.com and look us up under channels. And we're known as the Extraordinary Lovers. So for Laurie Handlers, I'm Michael Gibson, and we'll see you next time.